thumbs up when we're here too. Cool. All right, guys, we're 5 minutes late. We'll go ahead and get started. Make sure to grab yourself some grub while you're here. And welcome to the November Go user group. I'm in the wrong place. There we go. Reminder that the microphones are good. I think most of us have been here before, so we know that you will be picked up and put on YouTube if you have whisper conversations in the background. So if you are going to whisper, make sure that you're telling funny jokes or something. If you want to speak, we have a paper call link if you're comfortable with that process, but really for the most part, you can talk to us over the Forge Slack, come to us during meetings. Carson and I are the co-hosts. If you can get a hold of us, we are more than happy to try and get you scheduled. The focus for the foreseeable future is standard lib packages is what we're trying to get through. And if you have like fundamental talks about getting started with Go, those are also really great. If you have other ideas, let us know. We'd be happy to talk to you about other things, but we provide those as sort of a framework to help people pick a topic because that can be a little bit difficult. So please come speak. You don't have to have a lot of experience with speaking. This is a great place to get started. We are mostly just here to build the community, so come be part of that. I know that a lot of people, this is a weird time, jobs and hiring. The best place to do that is on the Slack. If you're not part of the Forge Utah Slack, this is how you become part of the Slack community, and that's the easiest way to network for jobs and hiring and stuff. And then you can just talk to people here and hang out, which is always fun. And with that, we will turn the time over to Miriah, who's going to talk to us about net HTTP for production Go services. That's good, I'm glad.
I sent it to you. Just like straight up, that's what I'm talking about. Here. Wow. Thing before having it. Hi guys. No, not that. I'm Miriah. You can see my slides, right?
Yes.
You came and now I have no like expertise anymore.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
But you have any expertise anymore.
Caddy server is way cooler than anything I'm going to talk about.
I use that HTTP. I didn't build it.
Okay. Sorry. I saw you RSVP, so I haven't got excited. I'm Miriah. Nice to have you here. When did I speak last? Did I speak at Go West? I did speak at Go West a couple weeks ago. I brought shirts and stickers. They're in the back if you'd like to grab some. I don't want to take them home because I'm moving and I don't want to take them home. I already packed up a bunch of stuff. I work at School AI. We are hiring for Go engineers finally to work on my team. We're the data platform team, so we'll be doing lots of data pipelines in Go and then data modeling and other fun stuff. I also do content. I have a Substack, Twitch, and YouTube. And I currently have a Go course on O'Reilly that says teaches Go to people. And that's me. Today we're going to talk about everything I could find in the net HTTP package. There was more stuff that I could cover, but I tried to pick out some niche things and some just like super general things. And I pulled a lot of things from one of the courses I wrote for O'Reilly that we don't use anymore because they don't do live courses anymore. And then the only thing I'm talking about that's not in the package is httptest because that's its own package, but you can't build servers without testing them, so we got that. No. I just want to charge the sucker. I do have some examples in this directory. My talks are on my GitHub. There's just a repo called talks. So I made some examples here. No, I didn't make a single thing. Claude made some examples. Based on what we're talking about, I also have the workshop that has a set of examples, and it also has links to additional examples. These are all pre-Go 121, so they are all examples before you could put arguments in the path. But they are still all great. And you should be able to go into any directory in the example and do go run main.go and see whatever you want. The link to my GitHub is on my link tree as well. Like, there's lots of ways to get there. So we're just going to talk about building servers. This is kind of the basic part, like the thing that everybody who writes Go will probably have to do and should do, because this is how metrics actually get collected, is with servers. Servers essentially pretty simple. They have the actual serve part and they have the handler part. Handlers are just functions that execute things whenever an endpoint's called. That's how it's set up. This is the generic listen and serve thing. It just runs a server on your local host at port 8080. And this will just set up a server. It's pretty easy to get going with testing and anything you could ever want to do. Handler functions always have this request type, right? The response writer and the pointer to the request type. And handlers, it's just see, you can see it's just an interface that implements that. This becomes really nice when we talk about middleware, because it ends up that you can nest a whole bunch of these requests and responses and reuse them, and it just becomes super fun. But essentially, this interface is what allows us to make handlers specific functionality for every endpoint we want. My favorite thing, well, this is just basic HTTP stuff. I'm going to skip this slide. Oh, the one thing that's cool is there is a basic auth built into the standard library that nobody should use in production, but it's there. I guess it depends on what your production is. If your production's the stuff I build, it's probably great. But if your production has any measure of security, don't use basic auth. But it's built into the standard library, and it's super great. And then there's some nice methods built into response writer. Just right on the top, you can add headers. So you just, right? So the response writer was the W in the thing. So you use this all the time. Headers, there's a get and a set headers, write bytes, and then write headers that lets you set the status code specifically. I almost never use write byte just because I am lazy. I prefer fumped printf. Essentially just, I don't know, lets me have a little bit more control over the strings. And also lots of other libraries let you do different things. My favorite thing about the standard library, though, this is my favorite thing about the standard library, and that's the fact that status codes are constants, so I don't have to remember the number. I'm really good with the word. I'm really bad with the number. I know that some people that write front end a lot are the exact opposite, and they could recite word numbers all day long but have no idea what the word is. But I know the word. I almost never use these. The method get post, I just write the string get post. I find it just as easy. My recommendation is always just pick one and do that on your team wherever you are. Just make that your best practice and don't like switch between the two in whatever code base you're on. File server, I was gonna say, if you want a file server, just use caddy server, but you can do it with the standard library. But you could also just use caddy server because it's way better. This is just a method in there. You just put a static thing in there and you put your prefixes and you essentially just mount files. Same way you do anything else. I didn't know that was a method in the standard library until this talk, so it tells you how many file servers I've written. So I guess you could use it for mounting CSS. That's what Claude says you can do. I've never done that. But you could nest assets and do all that fun thing.
Like I've done it before to just have a super simple binary to serve, like run a server for this random directory that I'm playing around with.
Yeah.
It'll just serve up all your assets. So.
I mean, at the last company I worked, all of our CSS assets were just in ECS buckets, and it's essentially the same thing. And that's, I don't use those either for personal stuff. I don't know what I do. I should have a file server. That's essentially what I learned 3 weeks ago, is that I need a file server. And I don't have one. So yeah. Yes, this is just creating a handler. This is basically saying that you can set it up as a function and then pass the function in instead of passing in first class, what do you call them? The word's not coming to me. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is, yeah, a handle phone. But yeah, this is a new thing I also learned about, the hijacker interface. That you can just take over, it's built into the standard library. Does anybody know that there was a hijacker interface built into the standard library? It literally says you can use it to take over a TCP connection. Like, that's the use case. And it was like, they're like, don't do it unless you wanted to like stop. So like, if somebody's trying to denial of service, you can essentially hijack the endpoint and reestablish. That was the use case that they gave on the docs. I've never seen this used.
So it's not like a middleware.
No. It attaches to the connection that you set up for your TCP, right? So it's actually a layer below server. So.
I feel like, it could be wrong, I feel like Kubernetes uses that.
I'm sure they
To
do.
the port forwarding
Maybe.
endpoint in their API. Because it is not, you connect it over HTTP, but then over that you're sending
Yeah.
bytes. So I could be wrong, but I feel like that's where I've seen it.
I'm doing the HTTP package, not the net package, so I didn't dive any further. I'm just kidding.
That's fair.
Just teasing. Yeah, that's, the docs essentially said the purpose of that was essentially to reestablish connection to HTTP if for some reason you were getting a service, or I could see it used in Kubernetes routing quite a bit. If you didn't know, there's HTTP 1 and HTTP 2, and I listen about HTTP 3 on podcasts all the time. I don't know who's using it, but it exists.
Does it really exist?
According to the podcasts.
It was just like an IPv6 situation where like, yeah, it's there, and it's better. Nobody uses it.
I think it's either, I don't know. Matt, have you ever written HTTP 3 stuff?
You're probably using HTTP3 on most
It
sites.
was HTTP2 before HTTP2.
Okay.
It was like beta.
HTTP2, the diminishing returns, like HTTP1 and HTTP2 was a great improvement for privacy and security and performance. And then HTTP2 and HTTP3 was a mild improvement, except for some cases where it was a really good improvement. But HTTP3 is barely HTTP3. Like it's totally different. It's over UDP. It doesn't use TCP.
Okay.
It's very complex. The code is all in user space. None of that's really in the kernel. So,
I haven't seen any use of it. Well, they don't have it in the standard library to my knowledge, but I'm sure you would have run into it at some point
I
doing
think
what
they're
you do.
working on it though. They just recently have started merging some code because it affects the net layer, the
Yeah.
TLS layer, and the HTTP layer. So there's a bunch of like APIs they had to figure
They
out.
didn't have TLS in their HTTP 2 support until they updated it recently, like 2 years ago, so.
Anyway, you're probably using HTTP3, but you're probably never going to use it in a Go program.
No.
It's only useful really in like browsers and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, HTTP 1.1 is like, I don't know, the thing I think I use most. It's just like there. That's where when was I doing that? When I created the workshop, it essentially, the docs that the Go docs talked that essentially the TLS support went through the 1.1 stuff, and then HTTP 2 was a separate thing, but anytime you run a server, so you can do calls over either one, which is super cool. I wouldn't know the difference. That's just not something I would use, but it's there. I'm sure other people would run into things where you do the difference. You can force it with a TLS. If it's something you super duper need, but I've never done that. There are a lot of functions that handle TLS in the standard library. Listen and serve TLS is one of them. That just essentially forces HTTPS over HTTP. I don't deal with that ever. You can add certs, but like I don't know, I feel like everybody uses a cert manager for it. Let's Encrypt is one of them. There's another one. At Tailscale, we dealt with Let's Encrypt all the time. Caddy uses Let's Encrypt, right? Or did you switch to a different one? So
Yeah, we use Let's Encrypt. There's Zero SSL. Any
Zero SSL is the other one, yeah.
any Acme compatible certificate authority. But listen and serve TLS won't get you a cert.
No, it doesn't get you a cert. It just is for, I'm just saying that's for, you pass the cert in there as opposed to using a separate whatever.
That's great for development or internal stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do, I don't know, I kind of try to avoid cipher stuff as much as possible, and then I run into it every once in a while. But you can set up your TLS config, pass it into the server, and then you would just do listen and serve TLS. I don't know, I just prefer to do my security a different way. When I'm doing something, I'm just essentially doing, it's either all behind a firewall, and so you just need to do service auth or something like that.
That's a lot of people just, it's not TLS locally in the gateway end. Let's say they have some other layer that like is on the edge that does all of that.
100%, yeah.
And it's easier. Like there's obviously so many problems, certification.
Yeah. You need, certs come up bigger when you want to expose things publicly. The only time I really ever dealt with, the number of times I personally put things publicly facing on the internet is 0. So that's why I've never used this. Shutdown's great. We talked about shutdown in a different thing, where we talked about a while ago, a channel with the signal, the signal interrupt and whatever. Typically, when I'm running a server, I will leverage a signal interrupt channel, and I will do essentially a server shutdown function at the end based on the context. I can't tell you how many times I've run something in a go routine and done a Control-C and it didn't stop, and then did a Control-C again and it didn't stop, and had to do multiple Control-Cs. So this is one of the things that you just need to make sure you throw a cancel function on it, get the context done, and handle whatever your graceful shutdown and whatever way you're doing that. My preferred way is doing a channel with the OS signals and doing a signal interrupt.
And I think it's important to call out why. Right, so let's say you just do those first 2 lines of code, right? Or even the first 3. You create a server, you start it, and you wait for, a signal to kill. Wait for that die.
Yeah.
If you started the server, someone's talking to it, you're in the middle of processing their request, and you get the signal to shut down, and you just die, and you don't call that shutdown function.
I forgot that part.
Everything in flight is just cut off the knees, right? So what that shutdown is saying, like, that's your grace period for in-flight requests to complete. You're saying, I want to go until up to this, this context is canceled. In your case, you got 5 seconds.
Yeah.
You have up to 5 seconds before I'm just gonna kill whatever's going on.
Usually also do secondary calls to do some kind of a force or whatever when you don't want to, when you want to go around the wait. I was going to say, a lot of the times you end up hooking up my use case for the workshop was we were hooking up the server essentially to a database and doing CRUD operations. So if you have any kind of transaction happening that way, you want to make sure that you can not have partial reads or writes to the database, which would end up corrupting state. Same thing with evented. Want to make sure you either unact the event or do something like that. So it essentially allows you to basically force either the request to be a reprocess or a complete. Really good for maintaining, I guess, state. I don't know a different way besides state in production. This is the default MUX router. Everything in Go that comes up by default is a MUX router. So that's multiplexing, which essentially means you can do connection pooling instead of doing a single connection. You can have multiple things connecting at once. Go handles that for you. Doing a custom muxing, you just do the new MUX server, and then you can do the listen and serve on top of that, and you pass your MUX in as the handler. Super easy. That's how I always set it up if I was doing anything in production. And I usually don't do too much else. This came out, Carson corrected me, that in 122 you could finally add arguments to your URL path. You can do named arguments essentially.
Honestly, I think this update was the one that made it so there's almost no reason to use a third-party mux anymore. Like, most people want a third-party mux for path, for like method-based routing and path parameters. That's what they wanted out of, like, there are all these other features, but like,
That's the method-based routing, right? The fact that you can do multiple methods on the same endpoint
and those placements.
and based on method, and you can do placement-based arguments. When I gave my course, which was, I think Go 121 was the last one I gave it, that was one of the biggest sellers for why we talked about third-party routers at all, was the fact that you could do positional arguments and do method routing. Middleware convenience was another reason, but like I said, I think that's just a personal preference.
They still don't have an official way to do middleware besides
No,
one
no.
function calling another function. There's, like, you can do middleware without a router, but it's hard because it's backwards, right? You have to do the last layer first.
I have an example of middleware over it here, so
Oh,
we'll get there. And so you can just put your path value, this is the new thing pulled in there based on the ID tag, and you'll pull it out for you. Super nice to handle those things in there. Middleware, see? These are the different things you can do in middleware. I mostly use it personally for request timing, authentication, and logging. I just really like metrics. And I try to avoid course headers wherever I can. I don't know why, the data engineer in me doesn't like them. Essentially, what it becomes is a nesting of handler functions. So you can do the return a handler with the next handler. You return a function and you put it in there, and you just have to make sure that you have a next.http, serve.http in there, and that's what says, okay, run this function, then run the next function. If I need middleware, I almost never write it myself. You can, but like middleware, I really like the way she does middleware, so that's how I've done it in the past. Only for the workshop though. You can do nesting middleware,
This is where it gets gross.
which Chi makes it really nice because of their routers.
Almost all of the other third-party muxes just make it like mux.add middleware, mux.add
And I do
middleware.
have-
And it does this behind the scenes for you. It introduces like slice iteration every time, so it's technically
Yeah.
more inefficient, but it's so much easier to understand and deal with than this like nest.
I'm happy to show that. It's in the slides. I have the examples I have linked at the end of the slides. So like I have examples for Chi and Fiber in there because I didn't like Gin and you can use fast HTTP.
I think it's worth showing because it's like, you can have one middleware and another middleware, and then your handler at the end, and that's doable without a third party.
So this is, where do we have it? That was the Chi one. This is a non-running code, but I really like the routers that we have here. Essentially, so we have, this is how it works. You add them with middleware.
Zoom that in
Yeah.
and.
Get rid of this thing on the side. Who needs that? So essentially, we have, oh, and the other thing too is this was really nice for adding Prometheus metrics. So you add a middleware to your route. This R is a router, and it returns a router. And a router is essentially just a clustering of endpoints. And that's what allows you to chain different, what are they, they're not arguments, but directives onto your path. So this has a middleware handler on it for the route game. We have a start game, then you can do additional, then this adds a game ID and then makes a new router, and then it has these paths on it, which, as you can see, creates something that look like this. And every time you create a new router, you return a new router, you can add middleware. So you can add specific middleware only to certain parts, or you can add it to the base router, which is what I do up here. when I say use middleware logger, use middleware request ID, use middleware real IP, and use middleware recover. So this is on every endpoint, whereas this middleware, where's the other one? The middleware handler, this is my custom middleware, which I think was me doing some permission check to see if a game had been created or not. I don't remember. Or was a custom middleware that I added for the sake of saying it's a custom middleware. Anyway, this was I felt like this was the most readable of them to do cheap, but yes, another reason to find your own library is middleware is a little nicer. And it looks a little bit cleaner than those nestings. Okay, authentication. This is directly out of my workshop. These are the auths we talked about. I only had example for bearer tokens. And I said API keys, I said use Tailscale, and OAuth, I said, I'm sorry, that sucks. Because doing, so in the X experimental, there is an OAuth library where people do actually do hard code different redirects for whatever their OAuth is in Go. Twitch has one, Slack has one, Cloudflare has one, I don't know, there's like 200. And then like I said, base auth's actually built into the standard library with the basic form coding as well. This is pulled right out of the standard library. You just pass the request, add base auth. It returns the username and password as from the request that was sent, tells you if it's valid as a check. If they're valid things will pull off. So if you don't have something after the colon, like the password didn't exist or the username didn't exist, it would return it invalid. And they're both okay that they were base64 encoded. That's essentially where that goes.
Well, what's interesting, if you've never done basic auth, that header you send back is the thing that tells your browser, like, ask them for a username and password. Like, this is how you get that, like, really old school username and password prompt pop up, is literally just sending that header. And the browser receives that. I asked for it, and it gave me this prompt, this header back. So now I'm going to ask you for a username and password. Save that to send with all my future requests to this domain, and then send another request back. It's like, it seems like magic, but like it literally is just like well-established standards. Like if you return this header, browsers will ask for passwords and send those with requests in the future.
I don't write anything that's client-facing, so I've never used it.
It's silly, but it's like
I agree.
it's fun. But it's fun how trivial it is. Like if you want to protect a website with username and password, protect a HTTP router or whatever, an API with just a basic auth. And of course, how you figure out what the username and password combinations are, that's a different story. But like the actual HTTP logic is literally send a header when you don't have a good username and password, and the browser will do the rest. You don't have to do any JavaScript. You don't have to just let the browser know that when that header is returned, it knows how to ask it to send in the future.
So typically the way I've done auth with the other methods, whether it be was just with middleware with some kind of function inside of it. That's actually the example of the custom middleware that I built just for the sake of doing it. I think everybody should implement their own auth at some point. It's a good exercise. Very common pattern for doing that. Clients are the other thing that comes out of there. Why on earth did it say don't use Git like that? It literally says like 15 times don't use Git.
This default client is the worst idea.
Well, not even default client, it's http.get.
Yeah, which behind the scenes uses the default client.
Well, like even the standard library docs just say don't use this.
Yeah, I don't know why they put it. I mean, this came up with your server too. There's a default server and a default client. This is global state that is stored in like package variables.
Yeah, that's why I always use the new server months whenever I'm building anything.
It's
You can unknowingly modify code in a completely separate package.
This is essentially the client that I will copy and paste almost every copy and paste. AI, I don't copy and paste anymore. AI generates it now. Almost everywhere when I need to do a just basic, like instead of using the default client from HTTP, this is now my basic client. There's tons of parameters you can use. You should look them up, see what the options are. But this is essentially just kind of where I start. If nothing else, add timeout. But you should always do more than just timeout. The default of 2 is too low. Claude really decided to say that? Okay, Claude. I don't know. Like I said, I usually do 10 and 60 and whatever. And then like I said, there's no good router without testing. HTTP test is a different package than HTTP, but the fact that we have a robust HTTP test package, that works for any HTTP router, I think. There was one, and it does not work if you're serving an MCP server over HTTP. That does not work. But that's not the HTTP. It uses HTTP, but that's the one use case where I could not get the response writer recorder to work when you were serving MCP over HTTP, which is also like a dumb use case for MCP. You should write this for every test, if nothing else, just to make sure you handle your codes correctly. Just every time you expect a certain code to be returned, you should have a test case for it. Just because if you don't, somebody will break it. You should do more than that, but that's the absolute minimum. If you specify a code to be returned, have a test for it.
I think there's interesting things in this test because this test specifically is not actually testing your routing at all.
No.
Right? This is like HTTP handlers are just functions, right?
Mhm.
And so what's happening here doesn't have to spin up a server, doesn't have to actually do any routing. It's like the lowest level, like given a request with this content, I expect a response like that.
If you do a third-party framework like Chi, you can't write tests like this. They actually require you to spin up a server. So it's very different. But like I said, all they're doing is testing the handler functions itself. So again, like I said, it's to make sure your logic that you return the status codes when you expect to return certain status codes, and the errors are returned the way you expect errors to be returned, especially if you start having specific words that are returned. Like if you're doing client facing, the verbiage you use becomes very particular. I would check that. I would make sure that no secrets get exposed or whatever hidden from logs come out there. So new server is actually a server testing, and you have to use new servers essentially if you're doing third-party routers. I did a lot of those. If you use multiple of these, I like to create a setup function that sets up a server once, and then you essentially have multiple t.runs off of that same server. Not required. If you have a database attached, that might mess it up. But you can leverage t.cleanup really well. That's just a preferred experience with that. Table testing. I don't even know why they created that. So I know why I had this slide in my other slides, but I don't know why that doesn't make sense in this talk. So yeah. These slots were generated by Claude Code, if you didn't know. I gave it a Google slide doc for my workshop, and then I added like 5 things, like a couple of Carson's suggestions and whatnot. That's why this was even there. Use the constants, I love them. HTTP is enabled. Don't use http.get or anything default by that matter, except for like, definitely if you're just trying to test something locally or do a proof of concept or whatever and it's not gonna leave your machine, that's a great use case and the only use case that I stand behind. TLS is behind any, there's listen and serve TLS is not the only function that has TLS attached to it. There's multiple TLS enabled functions right there, and always use HTTP test. So I'll take any questions. These are the resources, if anybody has any, but this was an easy thing. So any questions or comments or enlightening things? Go ahead, Derek.
I'm curious, like, in a business, are people having devs like stack their own middleware in main or something? Or is it like, here is, the approved, the Weave middleware, that does all the
set up
things right.
middleware, though. At least they did when I worked here.
Yeah, in a business, at any scale beyond one person, maybe even at one person, the less the dev can choose, the better. So I've never taken away a developer's choice on HTTP routing and wish I hadn't. I've only given them choices and wish I hadn't let them choose. So we made some really strong decisions early on to be like, you will get that, like, there are callouts to add middleware, like there are callouts, but like the default path is like, you will get the set of middleware that you get if you use this handler. If you go and do your own thing, you can do it raw, you can do that, but we make it really easy to like get the standard middleware, we make it really, I mean, you're talking about defining an API service to that point, and that's a whole other discussion, but yeah, I definitely have never,
We allow them
you
to,
do it, just do things the right way, right? Like,
we allow them to add additional middleware,
Yeah.
but
very
that's
hard to add, to remove any.
Yeah.
Can't really see, is that Jesus next to you, Carson?
Yeah.
I have not heard that one before.
That's why.
So,
But once you turned around, there's no beard, so.
Well, yeah, I'm too clean shaven.
so I don't know, we did some stuff early on with, I don't want to get too much into our API contract stuff, but we made a lot of choices to like define our API service that were built around proto files in directories where the file lived enforced where they were at the API level. And it made it, and it was a monorepo of the API service defined that way. It made it literally impossible to make PRs to stomp on somebody else's path because you couldn't make a file in the same place as somebody else's file that already handled that path. Or if you wanted to like subsume a section of, /users and there's like some new subpath, you would have to get permission from the owner of the person that made the /users folder and code-owned that in order to say like, oh, I'm going to add some new routing that takes all of the /users, phone number sub-traffic. So that's like HTTP.
I mean, I guess when I gave my recommendation at the court, my official recommendation when I educated people was you should always standardize at minimum at the team level. Ideally, there would be some amount of tooling available for basic things like monitoring and logging. If you need IPs versus masking IPs, those kinds of things would be standard for everybody. Go makes it really easy to create those libraries and share them out. So I think that's like a minimum. I agree. You should be able to add any custom middleware specific to your domain.
Yeah.
But
Standardizing.
How often would is that a real use case?
of adding middleware, I can count 2 times when I've done that. Well, but when I wasn't defining my own set of tooling, right? Right, just like this is a specialized case where we want an additional check on it. But yeah, no, generally speaking, I think that's why we have platform teams, is to let somebody else handle that so that you can just focus on shipping whatever you need to ship. I mean,
I think we have I know we have a breakout function for like creating a MUX without the default middleware, without suggested middleware, and I don't know that it's used anywhere.
I mean, it's also, I guess there's a problem with that, with creating your own things, just from an uptime situation, is you would have more surface area to break, right? If you have a single centralized store of validated middleware, then you would assume that it's better taken care of, it's used everywhere. The more custom things you do, the more surface area you have to break things.
Yep.
And so if you want to make things more reliable, there's an argument to limit that.
Things like metrics and stuff, nobody wants to, like,
Nobody
want
wants
those to
no, like, if you
work,
gave
but they
them
need to be consistent across everything.
product teams that are shipping customer-facing products, they do not have the desire to care about metrics.
That's true.
Like they're, to be fair, like they are already overwhelmed with this thing doesn't work. So like think about metrics for detecting them. So like, and it's just a time thing. So if you can ship that easier, it just makes their lives easier. It's a whole, I don't know, size matters. So, but yeah, essentially, even if I was building it for myself, I'd want to have reusable middleware. So, any other questions? Derek's got another one? For Carson?
Continuing down the metrics path. So like, we have like 3 kind of entry points into our code. That's HTTP router, gRPC, and like our worker queue consumer package that sets up all the metrics and everything. Does anyone else have other places where they would, and it's not just that, we're talking about middleware, right? Errors are returned up, and those are the only places that are allowed to log, not to log, but like to log the error. And they do like reporting errors to Sentry. Are people doing different patterns for those kinds of use cases? Or was that not clear enough? And
No, I mean, I was just thinking about it. I have one on my pub sub. I have one on my endpoints. And then the only other, I don't really have and then the pub sub would set up workers. No, I personally don't have anything set up outside of that. As far as like where the log error gets surfaced, no. Metrics I throw in everywhere I can, but
That can't, sometimes you have to do extra metrics, like in your handlers, right? But
yeah.
like, when I think about the alternative of like having a middleware catch panics and log those as errors, or catch HTTP 500 returns
yeah,
and log those as errors, the only alternative I can think of is every handler doing it individually. And I have no idea why I would ever want to do that. I've done some very, very silly things with context and maps in order to have handlers tweak behaviors of middleware on the fly, which is really fun. So we have a use case of like, HTTP coming through. We're tracking our HTTP metrics and, keep track of how long requests take, and then taking those requests and those stats and applying a service level objective to it, saying 99.9% of these requests have to complete within 1 second, right? And that all sounds really good. You get like one code path or one handler that you're like, hey, if I can hit 99.9, but this one thing uses this third-party service that makes it always take 5 seconds, and I can't fix that, so I either have to like turn my objective down to just like account for the slow path when it's hit, or we wanted the ability to like, when you hit a very specific code path in the handler, to actually influence how the metrics are emitted and say when you're accounting for this request at the end of the request, change the labels attached to that metric. But that's literally like the handler influencing the middleware, which is backwards. It's really easy for middlewares to pass data down the stack.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost impossible to have handlers affect calls up the stack, except for with context values where the values were maps or pointers, because
very interested to.
I could talk about that in detail.
We do some of that too, and I feel dirty
Yeah.
about it.
Literally, how else do you like have a child controlled parent? Like,
Yeah.
you have to have
You
something.
should feel dirty about it, because that means you have a really good use case.
That's about right.
If you did,
Well, I don't know if I have a good use case.
I'm just saying,
I
you're
need someone
justifying
to.
it somehow. You figured out a reason to use it, and if it doesn't feel good and you keep using it.
But I figured out the use case like 8 years ago, and I don't know if it's.
Carson, go fix it for him. Anybody else, any other questions? Oh, Derek's got one more.
I'll keep
One
going.
more from Derek.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
On the TLS, I'm curious how many people are like, we're running behind, an API gateway, and very few, if any, of our servers are running TLS. I'm curious how common it is for people to go full TLS gateway to server.
I've never done it, but I don't build anything.
If you have an enterprise security team,
Yeah.
then
We're
it is
on-
that you check the box.
Where I'm at, we have a bunch of microservices and we do like MTLS between the services.
Yeah.
You do that, or does your service mesh do that?
We do it through middleware stuff. It just gets built in and we can do it and stuff. And so,
That's cool.
so like, that's a use case, because there's like the public TLS certificate, right? That gets terminated in an AWS load balancer somewhere. But then like internally, like its requests bounce around, right? TLS, so that's kind of a useful way.
You're doing like Spire spiffy stuff or?
Yeah, it's like spiffy.
I think people miss the two parts of the TLS and like, so like, I'm not concerned about traffic sniffing within behind the firewall. But there's an identity part of MTLS that once you have it is really, really useful. Because like, maybe you're not so much worried about like, it's running on somebody else's cloud, like you can't really control the sniffing part of that. But you do get this thing where like service A talks to B and there's an identity guarantee with that MTLS. So that's one. I would have said not even one person here would have MTLS between services because PKI is still hard, right? And no one wants to maintain it because it's fine until it breaks and then your whole ecosystem falls apart. And you built your whole thing on this PKI infrastructure that fundamentally isn't complex, but it's just complex to manage.
Are you MTLSing Weave?
I wish I could say we were. Even our gRPC stuff is turtly, right? Hard on the outside, soft on the inside. Maybe I shouldn't admit that in a recording, but there you go.
It's not a requirement for SOC 2 and all those things that drive it, but eventually it is just some enterprise team says thou shalt MTLS or TLS everywhere.
I am curious, sorry, I don't know your name, but what's your use case for MTLS? Is it an enterprise security? Like what's your company? Is it checking a box? Is it?
Cloud security product.
Okay, that explains a lot.
It's a like a security solution
So you have to,
on the cloud, so.
If you try to sell a security product to someone and they say, wait, you're not using end-to-end or something, they're gonna laugh.
I mean, it's all in an attempt to like hard on the outside, but like, you know, more layers of security. Because like if a workload got started in the cloud somewhere in your cluster, you know, you can't just start making requests to any service they want, right? So.
I would love it. It's definitely got benefits. It's just the overhead to make it happen.
It's a lot of work.
Like I really respect the gRPC for kind of very early on in gRPC and Go saying like, it's secure unless you do this extra work to turn off the security every time, right? You have to admit you're insecure every time you make a gRPC client in Go. You just have to like specifically say connect, insecure.
I think gRPC had to copy most of the HTTP2 stack so that they could disable TLS.
Is that
At
true?
the time, yeah.
I think that's still true.
Well, yeah.
But
It's got its own like hacked version of HTTP2, I believe.
Okay.
I guess my comment was if they were to build it now, I don't know if they would have to do that, but I don't know, I'm not building it. You have a question, Kirk?
My more generic question was, I think it's, can you kind of elaborate on why http.get, http.post, like those top level functions where it's had the big bold, do not use this, like what the risk is when you do?
Yes, what was that thing there? It bads no timeout, that's the first one. I think there's a couple of things, like, this to me is the equivalent of a ping, and what you get from a ping, all it does is test that the liveliness is there, and like, not that I would ever use it as like a health call or anything. The first thing I would say is when you do it normally, when you create a client and do the .do method on it, you're allowed to add headers, which means for sure you know you're thinking through, is this a secure endpoint? Do I have to have a certain kind of response body? What does that look like? Actually, let's just go to the docs. They tell you right in the Go standard library why not to do it. Oh, why did it go there? Rolling HTTP standard library. Oh, first one with, yeah, it does give you a full response. Where does it tell you not to do? Oh no. So, you asked that leading question because you already had a response in mind, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a whole rant. I have a rant
I'm
on
gonna
package
defer
state.
to Carson on that one because I know he will have a better answer than what I have prepared.
Okay. I do not want to stomp on your stuff, but I think it's really
You're
important.
not stomping on my
It's
toes.
really, there are, if one of you, I don't know, does anybody else know of a, Matt, you might, are there other Go packages with like this obviously glaring package state problem?
Meetups because it's been.
I missed the last one.
Other Go packages, so HTTP, glaring issue with me, and I know why they have it, backwards compatibility guarantees, the global, the package server and the package level client. I don't know of almost any other, there's Slog with the package level logger, which is the only use case I have for global state that I can possibly think of is tracing, logging, metrics, where you literally want like one final thing that everybody hooks into for like that behavior, right? But like, I don't understand why there is a global client for HTTP.
Probably just convenience and the fact that clients pool
Connection pools.
So
It's connection pools by default with anything, but that's just like built into, like you can do a custom one and have a connection.
yeah, but you need to use that custom one because the pool is in the client.
Yes.
Okay.
But obviously that's bad for reasons I've mentioned because packages you import might override it or reconfigure it without you knowing.
And I think the pool is actually in the global transport, which I might actually have a better argument for. If you click it, so you click into Git,
Timeout is the other little, because
So, like-
go to the code.
click on that. It's not complex. So like, it's actually the code for http.get doesn't it doesn't obscure what it's doing. So if you follow default client or you just find that it's towards the top of the file,
What, the default client?
there's a var declaration like at the top of the file.
I know.
I wonder if default client wasn't exported in Go 1.0.
Maybe. I'm sure, I know the only reason I assume the only reason they're keeping it is because they promised they wouldn't break.
It's just an empty client, I knew that.
So this is my biggest problem. I think this is I see this with a lot of like early Go developers where they've got a a public variable declaration at the top of the package and think that's ever a good idea, right? Like this is a global shared state. So the reason to like that .git, you saw the .git for the new Go people, that http.get literally just took the client that exists at this top level and calls the .get function on it. It's almost as easy as you making your own client as a variable and doing my client .get. The problem is any code executing in your entire code base can modify the contents of that client as often as it wants to. Anything you import, anything it imports, like literally the entire code tree can just do default client dot, and it can go in there and change your timeout. So you might go at the start of your program, say the default client's timeout is 10 seconds, and then you import something, and after you run some code, deep in there, it tweaks the default client. Or you import something that imports something that imports something, and takes that client and overwrites it so that it has middleware in the client to scrape data and send it out. Like it's also insecure because literally anything that you import has access to that. And same thing with the server. It's in there for convenience. It's in there so that you don't have to have two lines in a sample code that says C : equals HTTP client C.get. Like it was put in there so that they had the shortest possible code in samples. But you'll notice there is no timeout on that.
It feels like it was written for demos.
Yeah, it was written for demos, and you like basically should never do it. And the alternative to do it is literally making a little client and calling that yourselves. And the same thing with the default server. I think the default server is the idea. There's another, if you scroll up, right, isn't there another var default server right above it?
Well, not in client.
Oh, not in client.gov, no.
It might be in server.
Probably it's in server.go.
And then, Miriah could just do Control S.
Oh, Mux.
You're right, it's default mux.
Oh, we're looking for Mux.
Just look for var space.
Oh, var
I think
space.
over the last like 5 to 10 years, the Go team has kind of learned that new global or like package exported
so vulnerable.
Especially the complex types
Oh, there
of
you go.
specs and stuff. I think they changed like the RAND package as well. Used to be a whole snafu with like seeding randomizer.
Yeah, they said don't use the old randomizers, only use crypto rand.
There are.
We have something that log.fatal is getting overridden by some package in a transitive dependency somewhere.
Is the function a variable? Log.fatal's a function you can override?
Somehow it just nukes it.
It's an interface
Yeah.
that you can be, oh, yes, if something else was overriding the interface, yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, so again, the same thing, all those HTTP shorthands where you're not operating on a client, you're not like adding a handler to a specific server you've created, or you're not calling a method on a specific client you've made. Those should basically just be ignored and replaced with making the client yourself or passing it around or whatever and then calling it on there. There might be some very, very minor stuff about like connection pooling, but that's never going to be your problem unless it's your problem. Like almost no one here is going to ever have a connection pooling problem with their clients most likely. I've never hit it. Where I have hit like the default client being munged with by things that import things that tweak your client. And again, it doesn't have to happen during setup. It can happen at any time in code execution where you just hit some weird code path that messes with it maliciously or accidentally. I don't know. It's one of my big bugaboos is like that even exists.
But yes,
Bugaboo. That's a great word.
but don't use it.
Right. Sorry, Miriah.
No, that's why I let you
I
answer.
have a rant on it,
You're
and
good.
so I can't.
Just remember that everyone pees in the default HTTP connection pool. Just make your own.
What's that?
I said everyone peed in the HTTP connection pool,
Yeah.
so to each their own.
That's right. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you. I think we have. Do we have any more, or did we actually run out again? I tried to order extra.
We have extra food.
Okay, plenty of food left. So